In 1958, a 7th grade boy could walk into a public school, get handed a screaming bandsaw, a blowtorch, and a live 110-volt wire, and nobody so much as blinked. Shop class was where American boys learned to make things with their hands. Real things, useful things, things their mothers kept on the mantle for 50 years. But here is the twist. Number 17 could take a fingertip clean off, and they taught it to 12-year-olds. Number 5 would get a school shutdown today. And number 1, boys spent an entire school year on it. And some of those still sit at the foot of a bed right now, 60 years later. These projects did not just fade away. They were quietly erased by lawyers, budgets, and standardized tests. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because they do not build boys like this anymore. Let's count down. Number 25, the pine napkin holder. Every boy's shop career started with something like this: a flat base, 2 upright sides, cut from a single length of soft white pine that cost the school a nickel a foot. The teacher would show you how to lay out the lines with a pencil and a tri-square, then let you loose on the coping saw. Your first cut wandered. Everybody's did. But you sanded it square, drilled 2 holes, and glued it up with hide glue, clamped overnight. It came home wrapped in newspaper, and your mother put it on the kitchen table and used it every single day for the next 30 years. It taught a boy the most important lesson in the shop: measure twice and cut once before he ever touched a power tool. Nobody makes a first project anymore. They hand you a Chromebook. Number 24, wooden bookends. A pair of L-shaped blocks cut from oak or maple offcuts the school got for pennies, then sanded until the grain glowed. The trick was making the 2 match, which taught a boy about symmetry and patience in the same afternoon. Some shop teachers had you route a small groove along the edge or burn your initials into the bottom with a hot iron. You rubbed them with linseed oil until they turned honey-colored, and they held up a row of encyclopedias in the front room for decades. Bookends were the project where a boy first understood that 2 of a thing is harder than 1. Today, schools do not stock hardwood, and half of them do not stock books either. Number 23, the birdhouse. 6 pieces of cedar or scrap plywood, a slanted roof to shed the rain, and a single hole bored with a spade bit, sized carefully so a wren could enter, but a starling could not. The teacher explained why the entrance faced away from the wind and why you left a gap under the roof for ventilation. You nailed it together with galvanized brad so it would not rust. Then your father helped you mount it on a post in the backyard. Come spring, a family of birds actually moved in, and a boy learned that something he built with his own hands could shelter a living thing. The birdhouse connected the shop to the whole outside world. Now it survives only as a plastic kit from the craft store, pre-cut, pre-drilled, pre-ruined. Number 22, the tie rack. Every dad had a dozen ties and nowhere to hang them, so every boy in America built the answer: a carved wooden bar, drilled with a neat row of holes, fitted with dowel pegs, and finished with a keyhole slot in the back so it hung flat on a closet wall. The real challenge was spacing those pegs evenly, which meant doing arithmetic with a ruler and actually caring about the result. You stained it walnut, screwed on a little brass hook if the school had them, and gave it to your father for Christmas. He acted surprised every year. That tie rack hung in the closet long after the boy grew up and moved away, and long after the ties went out of style. It was a small thing built out of love and a scrap of poplar. Number 21, the cutting board. A slab of hard maple, planed flat, edges rounded over with a rasp, then sanded through 3 grits until it felt like glass. The ambitious kids glued up strips of light and dark wood into a checkerboard pattern, which meant clamping, waiting, and resanding when it dried crooked. The teacher drilled it into you. Never leave a maple board in water. Always oil it with mineral oil. That board went straight into the family kitchen and got used for onions, bread, and Sunday roasts until it was worn into a gentle bowl in the middle. A well-made cutting board could outlast the boy who built it. Schools stopped teaching it because a sharp blade and a wet surface are now considered a lawsuit waiting to happen. Number 20, the spice rack. a small wall-mounted shelf unit 2 or 3 tiers with a thin rail across the front to keep the jars from sliding off. This was the project where a boy graduated from flat pieces to a real 3-dimensional assembly, learning how to cut a dado joint so the shelves locked into the sides without a single screw showing. You sanded every corner so your mother would not catch a splinter, then hung it beside the stove where the steam and heat slowly darkened the wood over the years. It held the cinnamon, the paprika, the little tin of nutmeg. The spice rack taught joinery through something a boy could picture in his own kitchen. That kind of hands-on joinery is now a lost art in public schools, sacrificed to test prep and screen time. Number 19. The sheet metal dustpan. Now we cross the hall into metal shop, where things got sharper. A flat sheet of galvanized steel, marked out with a scribe, sheared to size, then bent on the break into a pan with a rolled front lip so it would not slice the floor or your fingers. You folded the seams, hammered them tight, and riveted on a handle. The teacher taught you to file every raw edge smooth, because a burr on sheet metal cuts like a razor. It was heavy, it was permanent, and it swept up the garage sawdust for the next 40 years without ever bending. A store-bought dustpan cracked in a season. This one was practically indestructible. Metal shop like this is almost extinct now, deemed too dangerous and far too expensive to insure. Number 18. The step stool. A short, sturdy wooden stool, 2 steps or 1, built strong enough for a grown adult to stand on and reach the top cupboard. This was the first project that had to bear real weight, so a boy learned about load, about grain direction, about why a joint fails if you rush it. You used mortise and tenon, or at least glued and screwed cleats, and the teacher made you stand on it in front of the class to prove it would hold. That little stool lived in the kitchen or the closet and got stood on by 3 generations. When something you build has to carry a human being, the stakes feel real. Kids today never get that feeling because the closest thing to load-bearing they build is a spreadsheet. Number 17. The sheet metal funnel. First pattern break, and here is where it gets dangerous. They handed 12-year-old boys a flat metal disc, had them roll it into a perfect cone on a stake, and solder the seam shut with a hot iron and a stick of lead solder with an open flame nearby. One slip and you had a burn or a cut. Everybody in that room understood it, and somehow almost nobody got hurt because the teacher drilled respect for the tools into you from day one. You tinned the seam, ran the solder along the joint until it flowed silver, and filed the tip clean. That funnel poured motor oil and gasoline in the family garage for decades. Here is the wild part. The very hazard that makes a modern school district break out in a cold sweat was exactly what taught a boy focus, respect, and steady hands. We removed the danger, and we removed the lesson right along with it. Number 16. The cold chisel. A boy would take a length of octagonal tool steel, heat it cherry red in the forge, hammer one end to a cutting edge on the anvil, then quench it in oil and temper it to the right hardness by watching the colors run across the steel. This was blacksmithing, taught to children in a public school. The teacher explained the metallurgy, why too hard and it shatters, why too soft and it folds. You ground the edge, and you walked out holding a tool you had forged from a raw bar with fire and a hammer. That chisel could cut a rusted bolt in half. Men kept the chisels they made as boys their entire working lives. You cannot put a price on a child learning that steel bends to a patient hand, and you certainly cannot buy the confidence it built. Number 15. The ball-peen hammer, the companion project to the chisel and the pride of the metal shop. You forged or turned the head, drilled and shaped the eye, then fitted and wedged your own hickory handle so it would never fly loose. Balancing the head, dressing the face smooth, rounding the peen just right, this was precision work with real consequences, because a badly hung hammerhead is a projectile. The teacher checked every wedge personally. When you were done, you had a genuine tool, better than anything at the hardware store, and it hung on a pegboard in the garage for the rest of a man's life. Every time he reached for it, he remembered making it. A boy who forged his own hammer never forgot what his hands were capable of. That is a memory no worksheet has ever created. Number 14, the wooden mallet. Back in the woodshop, this was the tool you built to build other things. A hardwood head, usually maple, bored clean through, with a tapered handle driven in so tight it would never work loose. The genius was in that taper, cut so the harder you swung, the tighter the head seated. You turned the handle on the lathe or shaped it by hand with a spokes halve, sanded it smooth, and used that mallet on chisels for years afterward. It taught a boy that a craftsman makes his own tools before he makes anything else. There was a quiet pride in a shop full of boys, each swinging a mallet they had turned themselves. Now the lathes sit unplugged, sold off at auction, replaced by a 3D printer that does the thinking so the child does not have to. Number 13, the corner knick-knack shelf. A triangular set of shelves designed to tuck into the corner of a room, which forced a boy to work in angles instead of easy squares. Cutting a clean 45-degree miter that closed up tight with no gap was a rite of passage, and the first attempts always showed daylight. You learned to trim, to test fit, to sneak up on the cut. Some boys added a scalloped edge with the scroll saw or a little routed detail along the front. Stained and hung with 2 screws, it held your mother's porcelain figurines or a framed photo for the rest of her life. The corner shelf was where a boy learned that the hardest angles hold the most rewarding cuts. Schools stopped teaching it when they decided every kid needed to code instead of create. Number 12, the magazine rack. A slanted floor-standing rack, usually 2 compartments, that sat beside the good chair in the living room and held the Life magazines and the Saturday Evening Post. This one combined angled sides, a shaped handle cut on the bandsaw, and slats that all had to line up, so it demanded planning from the very first pencil line. You cut a decorative curve into the top, sanded every slat, and finished it in a warm walnut stain. It was one of the first projects that looked like real furniture, and a boy felt it. That rack held newspapers and TV guides for 40 years in the corner of a den. The magazine rack was proof a teenager could build something the whole family used every evening. That sense of contribution has simply vanished from the modern classroom. Number 11, the coat rack or hall tree. A tall standing post on a heavy base or a long wallboard fitted with turned pegs mounted right inside the front door where the whole family hung their coats. The base had to be wide and weighted so it would not tip, teaching a boy about balance and center of gravity through trial and error. You turned the pegs on the lathe, spaced them evenly, and screwed everything from behind so no fastener showed. It caught coats, hats, and school bags every single day and took the abuse without complaint. A hall tree was the first thing guests saw when they walked into the house, and a boy knew he had built it. That kind of visible, daily use pride is exactly what disappeared when shop class did. Number 10, the wired bottle lamp. Second pattern break, controversy incoming because this one ran on live electricity. A boy would take an old glass bottle or a turned wooden base, drill it, thread a lamp pipe up through the center, and wire the whole thing himself, socket, cord, and plug, stripping the wires and screwing them to the terminals. 12-year-olds wiring 110 volts in a public school. The teacher taught you which wire was hot, which was neutral, how to tie an underwriter's knot so the cord could never pull loose. You screwed in a bulb, plugged it in, and it lit up on the first try, and the whole room felt the magic of it. That lamp sat on a nightstand for decades. A boy who wired his own lamp was never afraid of a light switch again. Today, a school would sooner cancel the class than let a child touch a bare wire. Number 9, the sheet metal toolbox. A rugged rectangular box, bent and folded from a single marked-out sheet of steel, with a hinged or fixed handle and a fold-down lid. Every corner had to be measured so the seams met perfectly when you bent it on the break, and one wrong fold meant starting over with a fresh sheet. You riveted the joints, hammered the seams flat, and sometimes soldered the corners watertight. It weighed a ton, and it lasted forever, hauling wrenches around the garage long after the boy who made it had grandchildren. Every dent in it told a story. The metal shop toolbox was a lesson in precision layout you could carry in one hand. Now the brakes and shears are gone, hauled off as scrap. because no district wants the liability of a child near shearing steel. Number 8. The Bud Vase, the lathe project every boy remembered. A block of wood mounted between centers and spun at high speed while you pressed a gouge against it and watched curls of shaving fly across the room, shaping a smooth, flowing profile freehand with a spinning tool inches from your fingers took nerve and a light touch, and the first few dug in and chattered. But when you got it, you got a graceful little turned vase, sanded on the lathe, and finished with friction polish until it shined. A thin metal tube inside held a single flower. It sat on the windowsill for years. There is nothing in a modern school that feels like standing at a lathe, watching raw wood become a curve under your own hands. That thrill has been quietly retired. Number 7. The wooden wall clock. Once a boy had the basics, the shop teacher let him build a clock, a real one, with a battery movement fitted into a case he designed and cut himself. This was the project where craftsmanship met function. You planned the face, drilled the center hole for the shaft, mounted the hands, and finished the wood to furniture grade. Some boys inlaid contrasting wood around the numbers or cut a scalloped crown on the scroll saw. When you slid the battery in and the second hand started sweeping, you had built something that told time on the living room wall for the next 50 years. A clock a boy made ticked in family homes for generations. Schools quietly dropped it when woodworking became a liability line item instead of a life skill. Number 6. The jewelry box, or keepsake box. The project a boy built for his mother, and everybody knew it. A small hinged box with mitered corners, a lift-off or hinged lid, and often a felt-lined interior tray for rings and earrings. Fitting those tiny brass hinges so the lid closed flush, with no gap and no bind, was some of the most delicate work in the whole shop. You sanded it to silk, finished it in a deep stain, and lined it with felt from the home economics room down the hall. Your mother opened it, and something happened in her face. That box sat on her dresser, holding her good jewelry, until the day she passed it down. A keepsake box was a boy's clumsy hands learning to be gentle. There is no app that teaches a child to build something that makes his mother cry. Number 5. The gun rack. Third pattern break, and this is the one that would end a shop program overnight today. In rural America before 1970, a wall-mounted wooden gun rack was one of the most common shop projects a boy built, meant to hold a father's hunting rifle over the mantel or in the den. It was straightforward woodwork, a backboard with 2 curved felt-lined cradles cut on the bandsaw to hold the stock and barrel, finished in a rich walnut. To a farm family, it was as ordinary a project as a spice rack, a reflection of a time when hunting was simply part of American life. The rack itself was just carpentry, felt, and stained pine. But a project this common in 1965 is unthinkable in a school shop today, a measure of just how completely the world around that classroom has changed. Number 4. The wooden toy truck. The project a boy built not for himself, but for a little brother or sister. A chunky pull toy truck cut from solid blocks, with wheels turned on the lathe or cut with a hole saw, joined by a dowel axle so they actually spun and rolled. Rounding every corner so a toddler could not get hurt taught a boy to think about someone smaller than himself. You sanded it baby smooth, finished it with non-toxic oil, and tied a string to the front so it could be dragged across the kitchen floor. That truck got chewed on, thrown, loved, and handed down to the next kid in the family. A teenager building a safe, sturdy toy for a child learned responsibility no lecture could deliver. It is the kind of project that made a boy grow up a little, right there at the workbench. Number 3. The soapbox derby car. The crown jewel of many a shop and after-school program. A boy built a real gravity racer, a wooden body over a steering axle with rope or a bar to steer and a handbrake to stop, sized to fit his own body. This was engineering, aerodynamics, and mechanics rolled into one, learning weight distribution, alignment, and steering geometry through raw trial and error. You shaped the body, mounted the axles true so it tracked straight, and painted it your own colors. Then you actually raced it down a hill against the other boys in town, sometimes for a shot at the National Derby. Nothing in a modern classroom compares to steering a car you built with your own hands down a real street. That thrill and the year of work behind it has been paved over. Number 2, the crystal radio. In the electronics corner of the shop, a boy built a radio that needed no battery and no plug, running on nothing but the energy in the radio waves themselves. You wound a coil of copper wire around a cardboard tube by hand, hundreds of careful turns, wired in a germanium diode and a tuning capacitor, strung up a long antenna, and clipped on a single earphone. Then, out of thin air, a voice. A boy heard a distant station come through a device he had assembled from a spool of wire and a crystal, powered by the sky. That moment turned a generation of kids into engineers and ham operators and inventors. Building a working radio from scratch felt like catching lightning in a shoebox. We traded that wonder for a phone that does everything and teaches nothing. Number 1, the cedar chest, the capstone, the project a boy spent an entire school year building, and the one that outlived everything else on this list. A large cedar-lined blanket chest, dovetailed or at least tightly joined at every corner, with a fitted hinged lid, cut and planed and sanded from real hardwood over months of Saturdays and after-school hours. This was every skill a boy had learned. Joinery, glue-up, sanding, staining, hardware, all poured into one enormous piece of furniture. The aromatic cedar lining kept the moths out of the wool blankets. When it was finished, sanded smooth and rubbed with oil until it glowed, a teenager had built a piece of furniture good enough to last 100 years. Mothers stored quilts in them, daughters filled them for their own homes, and right now, at the foot of beds all across America, cedar chests built by boys in shop class 60 and 70 years ago are still holding blankets, still smelling of cedar, still standing as proof of what a kid could do with a year, a pile of lumber, and a teacher who believed he could build something that mattered. 25 projects, 25 things a boy could hold, use, and hand down, and nearly every one of them is gone from American schools, cleared out by liability lawyers, shrinking budgets, and the endless push toward screens and standardized tests. We did not just lose the projects, we lost the hands that made them. Which one did you build or wish you had? Tell me in the comments, and if this brought back a memory, hit subscribe. They do not make boys like this anymore, but we can at least remember when they did.